Guest today is David Aldridge. He is the editor-in-chief of The Athletic. He got his start at the Washington Post, has been the sideline reporter for TNT, has covered the Dream Team in Barcelona, and is also the sideline voice for NBA 2K. If you enjoyed this episode of The Big Douglas Show, please make sure you like, subscribe, leave us a couple comments, let us know what you thought. And without any further ado, my interview with David Aldridge. All right, David, welcome back to the show. Always excited to spend a little time chatting ball with you.
Yes, sir, Doug. My pleasure, man. Always.
Big news for The Athletic. Jim Trotter joins on. What does that mean to have him as part of the organization?
Oh, man, I'm glad you mentioned that. Look, Jim's work speaks for itself. He's one of the best football writers out there, has been for a long time. Clearly not afraid to speak truth to power, which I like. And is, a guy that has been a standard setter for a very long time. So I'm glad that my company was proactive about this and didn't sit back and wait. They went after him immediately when he became available and got him before somebody else did. So yeah, I'm thrilled, and I'm happy to call him a colleague after all these years.
David, it made me laugh. After the last time you were on the show, which I think was maybe towards the end of football season, I had popped the show up. I was over at my cousin's house, and he's got a young nephew, and we're up. The two of us are up on the wall. They're watching on YouTube, and he goes, "You could hear him thinking, his young son," and he goes, "That's the guy from 2K." And it made me laugh, and I was thinking, how did that happen? How did that come around? I always think it was interesting that I don't know if he's a great reader of your work yet, but he knew exactly who you were when he heard your voice.
That was, I tell people all the time, Kevin Harlan is fully responsible for my children going to college. This is a Harlan production from start to finish when I was at Turner, and we were doing a game somewhere one week, and he mentioned it. And I tell people all the time, Harlan talks exactly the same way off the air as he does on the air. So he goes, "David, you should get into this 2K game I'm in. They need a sideline reporter." And, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, Kevin. I'm not, I'm an old man. I don't play video games anymore." And he said that it was great and the people were great and I should get in touch with him. And he was right. It was a real eye-opener for me, Doug. I mean, I had no idea the level of detail that they went into to make sure that the game is authentic as possible. Going to arenas and looking at signage in the stands and looking at how the seats, the slope of the seats in every arena to see what the angles are like. They really, really work hard at making this game authentic. And so the fact that I was able to work with them immediately, and they were able, we had a great relationship from minute one. They're good people, and it's just been fun. And I love that there are kids now, that didn't have no idea about my career as a reporter that know me from the game. That's fine with me. I mean, it's great. Yeah. It's a whole new audience. They're learning about me in a different way. I think that's terrific. It's how my kids learn. They watch video games. I wish they didn't, but they do. So it's been great. It's been a great partnership. I'm going to sign with them up for another couple of years. So in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. Really thrilled by it. And it's a really good product as the sales obviously indicate.
How much time does it take on your end to do it?
Well, not as much as it used to. When we first started, I had to go out to California and do some work out there. I had to go to Atlanta. They put me in the motion capture suit that, with the like everybody sees that you have to wear. Did that. Now it's down because we have so much that's in-house already. It's down to like a week. It's not that much time now. It's a couple of hours for like 3 or 4 days. It really isn't that much. It's just me reading scripts now, basically, more than anything else. And they give me the flexibility to ad lib. If it doesn't sound like something I would say, they're perfectly fine with me changing the script a little bit. And so it's not that much work now. It's not as much work as it was at the beginning. But they're constantly updating it. We have to put next year's class in. We're going to put Wembanyama in and Scoot Henderson in and all the guys that are going to be at the top of the NBA draft. So we'll put them in and they'll be ready to go.
One of the things that you got to do, I'm a 45, so that dream team was really a part of my childhood. Basketball was my favorite sport until, I fell in love with football. And I'm curious what some of that was like being a part of that group over there. That really was historic.
It was amazing, Doug. It was one of the highlights of my career because I was 27 then. And, it was one of the first times where I really kind of advocated for myself because, it's a big story, right? Like everybody wants to cover this story. And I went into my boss's office the year before and said, look, I'm covering the dream team. I cover the NBA for you. I deserve to cover the dream team. And he said, sure, go ahead. And, I was able to go to Spain and do that. And it was,
that was with the Post, David.
Yeah, when I was at the Post, and it was great. It was everything that they said it was going to be. It was spectacular. They were spectacular. The competition was not what it would be now because the rest of the world was not as developed in terms of basketball as it is now. So it was really kind of like an exhibition tour where you literally saw the best basketball team that you would ever see put together on one team. And it was unbelievable. And the adulation that they had everywhere. And, we followed them everywhere. They had a tournament in Portland. They had training camp in San Diego. Then they went over to Europe and then finally to Spain. And we were with them at every step. And it was like, I guess it's like what it would be like to follow a rock band around, a really successful rock band around. Because the questions weren't really questions. They were more like, you guys are so great. And what's it like being so great? So it was kind of a different vibe to most of the journalists from overseas, especially. That's okay. I mean, I get it. It was spectacular. And it was great watching them play, really not so much against their opponents, but against the game itself, right? Like it was, how good can you be? How good can one basketball team be? And I forget. I think the average margin of victory was 47 points or something like that. I mean, it was phenomenal. They lived up to all the hype.
And a lot of those guys on the back end. So, I mean, the pushback, right?
Yes.
We didn't even see probably half that. I mean, Larry Bird was not Larry Bird
right
at the time. And there were several guys like that. So
no question. Yeah.
To have gotten some of those guys. Will we ever get the full footage? We saw some, I think, from the dance. Will we get the full footage from the practices?
Good question.
Who owns it? Who's got that right now? Do we know?
NBA Entertainment probably has a lot of it, and they use some. They did a documentary on the Dream Team a few years ago, and they showed the scrimmage, the famous scrimmage that they had where Magic and Michael just went at each other. Their respective teams just went at each other in Monte Carlo. That everybody talks about as this great kind of underground gem of the NBA. So they showed some of that, but I would imagine either NBA Entertainment or NBC. And the Olympics are hard because, the Olympics, they don't let a lot of Olympic footage get out on YouTube. If you Google stuff, you don't see a lot, because they really hold on to that stuff. So you're not going to just be able to Google up, the U.S. Yugoslavia game. They hold on. It's very proprietary on their part. So you just have to kind of find it when it's released kind of sporadically, like it was for that Dream Team doc.
Would the world basketball have gotten to the point where it is now if the Dream Team doesn't assemble and go on that specific tour? Do you think we're at where we're at today without that?
No. And that's very, very, very right, Doug. I mean, that was a catalyst. And you talk to guys like Dirk Nowitzki and Pau Gasol and people like that were kids back then. That's what gave them hey, basketball, I could do that. We could play. Let's try it. Let's see how good we can be. And, it was not just the Dream Team, but it was all the clinics that coaches did throughout the 80s and 90s, went overseas, went to Europe, went to Africa, went to Asia and did coaching clinics and really kind of planted the seed and then you started to see guys, individual players from different countries like Petrovic and Vlade Divac and people like that start to have success when they came over in the NBA. And that kind of made it more plausible, possible for a guy like Dirk Nowitzki as a kid to say, as an 18-year-old, to come in and give it a shot and, be, I think, the most important, European player ever to play in the NBA. Like he's the standard now for everybody else that follows him. So yeah, no, that was definitely a big reason, a big kind of impetus for the growth of basketball around the world, really. I mean, in every part of the world. I mean, because everybody watched that and saw that, and they knew that basketball is a game, economically, that is achievable for most people around the world. Like you don't need a lot. You don't need any equipment to play basketball. You need a ball, like a hoop. That's all you need. And you don't need, shoulder pads or bats or gloves or, masks or anything like that. You just need a ball and a hoop, and you can play. You can play by yourself. And that's another thing. So from an economic standpoint, more kids around the world could play basketball than could play most other sports. I think that's why soccer is so popular, because you don't need a lot of equipment to play soccer. You just need a ball and a net, and you can play.
It looked like Joker was going to get another MVP this year. He didn't. How do we look at Joker? How do we rate him? If he looked like LeBron, and I don't mean from a color standpoint, but just more like a body style, right? Like, would we be easier on him than I think we are, because he looks like he shouldn't be winning MVPs every year?
Well, he doesn't look like he doesn't look, he's not chiseled. Let's put it that way, right? He's not rippling with muscles and things like that. And that's kind of, maybe that's in there somewhere. The fact that he's not from this country, I think, has something to do with it too. I think there's a certain amount of, how good could he be? And that's falls. If you watch him for 5 minutes, you realize how great he is. Like he's great.
Is he getting the early Tim Duncan treatment?
Yeah, he's great, and he doesn't talk a lot. To your point, I mean, like Tim was very quiet. Tim didn't have very much to say. You don't see a lot of Jokic commercials and a lot of Jokic interviews and things like that. So maybe you kind of take him for granted a little bit. I think is a strong possibility. The way we took Timmy for granted, I think, for 15 years, you just kind of assume, well, Tim Duncan's great, and you just kind of, you don't have anything else kind of feeding that narrative, like seeing him all the time on TV, and you're kind of out of sight, out of mind. And Jokic, what I love about Jokic, he was great, because I was at All-Star in this year in Salt Lake City, and he clearly was really, really did not want to be there. Right. And the reason he didn't want to be there is because the game is such an abomination. The All-Star game is so awful, and it's so antithetical to how he views the game of basketball. So I like that about him, that he didn't try to hide the fact that this is not what I do. This is not the type of basketball I like playing. So, and that's part of it too. Like, he's not a showman, right? He's not dunking, making all these great crossover moves and all that stuff. So he just plays great, and at the end of the day has beaten your team again, So, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things in there with that. But let's be fair now. He is a 2-time most valuable player. Well, it's not like he hasn't won it. He just didn't win it for a 3rd time in a row, which is very rare. Very few people have done that. I think Larry Bird is probably the only guy that I can think of that's done that. So it's not like it happens a lot. But he is, and I don't know if he finished 2nd or 3rd in the voting this year, but he was in the top 3. So he's very well respected. It's just that he doesn't have the PR machine behind him that some other candidates do.
David, I feel like, and it sounds crazy to say this, I more and more think of Kevin Durant as an afterthought. Like he's not forefront in my mind when I'm thinking about the game of basketball. And that sounds ridiculous that I just said that out of my mouth. What is Kevin doing to his legacy? I don't understand what the plan is. Maybe there is no plan. What is going on with KD?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wonder if he had the last 5 years to live over again, what would he do? Would he do the exact same things in the exact same way? I'm kind of guessing he wouldn't. And that doesn't mean that I think he would stay with the Warriors necessarily, but I think he would have picked one place and stayed there and tried to make that team better. It seems like, it feels like, I'll put it this way, it feels like he's kind of bouncing around now from place to place, looking for something perfect. And there is no perfect team in the NBA. There's just teams. Some are good, some are bad, some are, better than others. And he wants to compete at the highest level for championships. I get that. But, I mean, they traded, you have to know as a superstar player, like, if I want to go to a certain team, what is that team going to have to give up to get me? And what's going to be left for me to play with when I get there? And that's where I just wonder if Kevin really thought that through with Phoenix. Like, to get Kevin Durant from Brooklyn's going to ask for a lot, as they should, right? And so who am I left with? And they're just not a lot left. And so they had their margin for error went to almost nothing. And then when Chris Paul gets hurt, as unfortunately he gets hurt every year during the playoffs, every year, and then Ayton got hurt, there was nothing left except him. And it, you can, when you get to this level of the playoffs, teams can take a guy away. They can devote all their resources to taking one guy away. And so I think Denver, after games 3 and 4, said, look, we're not letting Booker beat us again. Like, that's not happening anymore. And so it was up to KD to beat KD, and he couldn't do it. Now, is that because it's a long year and he just had a bad series, or is it because he's 34, 35 years old now and he's had a bunch of injuries the last few years? We don't know. But yeah, clearly he, I don't know how you, going forward, think of Phoenix is definitely going to be like a top 2 or 3 team in the West. You just,
right.
I don't see it. Now if they trade Ayton and they get some pieces for him, maybe, but they got some work to do. I mean, that's 2 years in a row they got boat raced and on their floor in an elimination game in the playoffs. That's not good. I mean, that's not good for Monty Williams or anybody. So they got some soul searching to figure out exactly what it is and who they are.
Are you surprised that this Lakers Warriors series has been so competitive? I mean, first off, give LeBron his due, right? I mean, how long has he played now? And to see what he does, it's just incredible. But were you surprised by this?
No, not at all. I mean, look, they are 2 completely different teams in how they play, but they are 2 really good teams, right? I mean, the Lakers have been one of the best teams in the league since the trade deadline. They made all these trades. They really give Rob Pelinka credit that he really figured out, hey, we got to fix this. This is not working. What we put on the floor at the start of the season is not good enough. And they made some trades, including Hachimura, who's helped them a lot, but then, made another trade, with Minnesota. They brought D'Angelo Russell back, and they brought in Vanderbilt and some other guys that have really helped them. And they're a much deeper team now than they were at the start of the season. And that helps because LeBron is 38. He's not going to be great every night. AD, as we know, tends to get injured a lot. So you have to have enough people around to kind of survive those glitches that you're going to have. And now they do. And so I'm not surprised by them. And Golden State's Golden State. Look, they're champions, man. I mean, they've won 4 of these things in the last 9 years. They know what they're doing. So now it's a matter of, do they get enough production out of Klay Thompson or Jordan Poole? When they do, they're pretty good. And when they don't, they're pretty vulnerable. And that's where this series has gone. Just look at the games where those 2 guys haven't played that well. They've lost those games, and when they have played well, they've won those games. So that's really the barometer to me of Golden State, because Steph's going to be great. One way or another, he's going to score a lot of points, or he's going to have a triple-double. Draymond Green's going to impact the game one way or another. Sometimes it's scoring, but a lot of nights it's defense and rebounding. But Wiggins has been really solid, I think, in this series. But the barometer is, what's Klay Thompson do? What does Jordan Poole do game in, game out? I think that's how you determine how good the Warriors are going to be.
Do you expect that Bob Myers will actually leave Golden State?
It's an excellent question. Don't know the answer to that right now. You would certainly think that if the Warriors wanted to keep him, they would have gotten a deal done with him by now. You don't let guys with that track record become free agents, just like players, right? You don't let a guy who's, with that kind of accomplishment have his contract expire. That's very unusual in this league. So you have to think, I would have to think that either Bob wants out or they want him out, one or maybe it's both, maybe it's mutual, but it certainly seems like that's coming toward an end one way or another.
For the one team, David, that doesn't end up getting Wembanyama, are there some, fallback picks? Are there some bonus? Who are those guys?
Yeah, sure. No, the top guy is Scoot Henderson, the guard out who's played for Overtime Elite this year down in Atlanta. Now, he's not perfect. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's a really, really good lead guard going forward. If you think about like John Morant or Derrick Rose type of point guards that are scoring point guards, have the ball in their hands a lot, but really do impact the game and make their team and force defenses to deal with them. And that makes their teammates better. Scoot Henderson's that kind of player. Now there's some questions about the shot. The shot's not there yet. It's not where you want it to be. But Doug, I think it's pretty clear if you go back and look, the one thing that guys in the NBA tend to get better at as their careers go on is shooting. Because it's such a premium. There's such a premium on it. And so if you're a great player with a strong work ethic, you're going to get better shooting. I mean, Jason Kidd couldn't put the ball in the ocean when he first came in the league, and now he's the all-time three-point maker in the history of the league. You get better. You have hours and hours to practice. You'll get better. He'll get better at that. I don't have any doubt about that. But he certainly is, I think, on most people's boards is number 2. Now, there's some question, the the kid from Arkansas, Miller. I mean, that's going to be a tough one. Is the talent there? Absolutely. Kid is gifted. He can score. He can pass. He's 6'9". He's got an NBA body. He plays tonight if you have a game. You know what I mean? The question is, you cannot walk away from the incident. I hate to say incident. Yeah, you can't walk away from his role in what became a murder of a person. Right. Like he gave a gun to someone who used that gun to kill someone. Now, that doesn't mean he did it. I'm not saying he did it. I'm saying he was a part of why that happened. And you have to address that as an organization. Like, you can't just walk away from that. And that's going to be problematic, I think, for a lot of NBA teams, Then you have the Thompson twins, Amir and Asar, I believe is how he pronounces it, who also are playing this year for overtime, and they're very talented, different ways. Amen's a little bit better. Most scouts I've talked to think he's a little bit better, but Acer is very good too. So you couldn't go wrong with either of those guys. So this is a good draft at the top.
Okay.
Top 5 or 6 picks. You can get a really good player this year at the top of a draft, but Wembanyama's the guy. He is the guy. He is the first among equals. You know what I mean? Like he's 7'4", Doug. He does stuff that I've never seen a guy his size do ever. Yeah. His ability, he's not a guy that's just kind of like slapping the ball around. No, he's handling the basketball like a guard handles the basketball, And so if he does that, then his playmaking ability is off the charts.
So where does he fit into an NBA roster?
Anywhere. Doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Just put him on the floor. You'll figure it out. Some people think he should be a center because of his skill set. It makes him almost unguardable because there's no center in the league that wants to go out there and try to guard that guy.
Right.
So you could put him there. You could put him at the 4. But really, Doug, I mean, a guy like that, there's no comp. Physically he resembles like a Ralph Sampson, but Ralph never did the stuff that this guy can do because he wasn't required to do it in those days. So this is a unicorn. This guy's a unicorn. So it will take a coach, I think, a year or 2 to figure out like what's the best way to utilize this guy.
Right. Okay.
But they'll figure it out, and then he's going to be a problem for the next 15 years because he's he wants to be great. That's the thing that really intrigues me about him, is that, you know, he came over here last fall, didn't have to. He was going to be the number 1 pick, but he said, I want to show you guys how good I am. And he did. You know, he went to Vegas with his team and was unbelievable in a couple of exhibition games. So he wants the pressure and the responsibility of being a franchise player. So, you know, a guy like that, yeah, he's going to be special for whoever gets him.
Let's talk a bit about the home team. Are they already made their mind on who they're resigning before they've hired a GM? Like, is Ted picking the players now? What are we doing, David? Please explain it to me like a real dumb so I can figure it out.
Doug, it's a great question, man. I don't have an answer for you right now because I don't know I don't know who the GMs are going to be, or the president of basketball operations, whatever title they give them. You know, it is a very salient question. You know, what is going on over there with the Wizards, and how are they deciding, you know, going forward? Who are you? You know, like, what's your philosophy in terms of how you're going to win a championship, or at least compete for one? Like, you can't just roll that team back out next year, with this year, right? And so, you know, it certainly seems like they want to re-sign Kuzma. I think Porzingis could be slightly more problematic, but not. You could re-sign him too. But the problem, Doug, now is that the new collective bargaining agreement, which kicks in next year, has really put some real teeth into the penalties for repeated, you know, exceeding the salary cap and exceeding the luxury tax. You've seen teams like Brooklyn and the Clippers and the Warriors just kind of thumb their nose at the luxury tax. They just don't care. You know, whatever, what's the penalty? 50 million, 60 million, 80 million? We don't care. You know, they just keep paying it. And that's not what it was designed to do. It was designed to prevent people from paying that kind of money. So now they have really doubled down on the penalties. It's going to be almost impossible to have the kind of what we've come to know as a super team, which is 3 superstars playing on one team. The penalties are so harsh now, both in terms of the inability to use exceptions to sign players, all the things that teams did to kind of bring in cheap players to play around their superstars. You're not going to be able to do any of those things now going forward. You can't use draft picks. You can't use the exceptions. You're not. It's going to be very, very difficult to build a team around 3 guys making, you know, an exorbitant amount of money. So the Wizards are going to have to face that, even though their 3 players aren't good enough to compete for it. They're not good enough to make the playoffs.
Why are they spending over the luxury tax anyway, right?
Right, exactly. So, and Ted doesn't want to pay the luxury tax. So my guess is that no matter who comes in, they're not going to run this back. You know, now trading Beal is not going to be easy, but everybody in this league can get traded. It just takes one team to want the guy, and you can make a trade that works. So, and I think there's more than one team that would want Bradley, even at the price he's at, because Bradley's a pretty good player. He's just not an elite player. It's not an insult to say that. Like, he's a really good player, but he's just not one of the 10 or 15 best players in the league. That's all.
Right.
And they're paying him like he is.
Who do you end quickly on the last thing on the NBA before we switch over to the Commanders? Who do you think ends up in the NBA Finals this year?
Whew, I tell you what, man, you know, it's hard not to pick Denver right now. Like, they are rolling, and they're really playing at a high level at both ends. They've got buy-in. KCP is just a perfect kind of vet for them right now. You know, Murray's playing really well. Porter has not been great, but he fills in and does. You know, they got depth. You know, they have a lot of depth, and and Jokic is just so good. Like, nobody can guard him. Nobody can do anything with him. You know, so you know, plus now they get rest while Golden State and the Lakers keep beating up on each other, right? So, I think Denver comes out of the West and the East. You know, I thought Boston was going to go out in Game 6. They looked like they were dead on their feet, and Philly didn't take advantage. I still think of the teams that are left, Boston's got the most versatility in terms of their personnel. They can play different ways. They make a ton. They take a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. So I'm going to pick Boston, but I'm not as nearly as confident as I was before because Miami's playing really well. I keep picking against Miami and they keep winning. So, I mean, I must be the dummy. So, but I'm going to pick against them one more time. I think they beat New York and get to the finals, but I think Boston will beat them in 6 or 7 games. And I got Boston and Denver in the finals. And that'll be a great series. I mean, that'll be a great finals, I think.
All right, let's do a little bit of Commanders before we get out of here today.
Sure.
Is there anything that we can glean from what Harris has done as the owner of the 76ers to kind of look into what he may be looking to do here?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I've talked to people that have worked with him. He's very demanding. There's no question about it. Like, he wants answers to his questions. But they're good questions. Like, he's a smart guy. He's a really smart guy. So he's not going to, I think he has a certain amount of fandom, but not like the last guy, where he wants to be the players' friends and, come to the house and get the parking spaces. No, he's not going to do that, right? He's going to give them every opportunity to excel. But I think there's a level of detachment there with Josh Harris. I don't think he and Embiid are vacationing together. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think so. That's not happening. So that part's encouraging, I think, for Commanders fans that he'll spend the money. I mean, clearly he spent money on the 76ers. He is a big analytics guy, loves analytics. Once,
so then the two-man department that the Commanders currently have probably gets bigger.
Might get bolstered a little bit. Yeah. I think you can expect a little investment at that end of the tree, right? So yeah, no question. He's good. He's big on numbers. He wants to know, like, what's the value of a second round pick? What's the value of an unrestricted free agent? Like, how much are we getting what we're paying for? Like, he's always asking, are we getting what we're paying for player X, player Y, player Z? So yeah, I think it's good. Like, this guy is a real hard driver, but he's fair. I don't think he's going to be, and I don't think, like, there's no indication from the reporting I've done on this guy that the off the field stuff that has always been at the root of the dysfunction in Ashburn is going to be present with Josh Harris running the team. It's going to be like a hedge fund. Like, it's going to be hard. Yeah. It's going to be difficult for people to work just because he's going to expect a lot out of you. But that's as far as it's going to go. There's not going to be the dysfunction and the toxicity and the harassment, I don't think, will be part of a Josh Harris Commanders team. I mean, there's been no indication that that's been anywhere, either with the 76ers or the Devils. He also owns the New Jersey Devils. So it's just about results. Like, what are we doing to get the best results possible on the field, on the rink? And that's what he cares about.
Now, did he get to the 76ers and clean house? And I'm thinking, as far as like Jason Wright and Ron Rivera and these guys, you think they get a full year? What did he do with the 76ers? Do you recall? I didn't look.
Yeah. I mean, my guess is, I don't think they're going to get fired, in July. I mean, that would be ridiculous. Yeah. I don't think he's going to do that. I think he'll give them this season, sure. And take stock of where they are and how they've built this team and whether it's worth it to kind of go to reinvest in them or not. But when he got to Philly, I mean, it was different. Like, they were a playoff team, but they were a lot like the Wizards are now. Like, they were better little. They made the playoffs a couple times, but they weren't going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, they were clearly not an elite team. So when he got control of the team, he tore it down to he was the architect of the process. He's the guy that brought Sam Hinkie in and said, do whatever you want to do. And backed Sam for many years when Sam was like, I have zero interest in winning games right now. Zero. I am all about getting as high amount of draft picks as possible for the next several years. We're not going to even try to win. We're not even going to field a competitive team. And if anybody shows that they're any good, we're going to trade them for more draft picks. That's what we're going to do, And so it was, and it still is a very controversial way to build a team. But at the end of the day, they did get Joel Embiid out of it. Like they did. Now he's a star player. He's an MVP. He's a superstar. So, so he did take it down. Now, it's easier to do that in basketball than in football. There's only 15 guys on a basketball team. So it's easy, relatively speaking. You can't, cut 53 guys. You have to keep some of them, right? So, but I do think everybody's on notice. I mean, as soon as this thing gets approved, and I do think it will be approved eventually because they want Snyder out that bad. Ron Rivera's on notice. His front office is on notice. Jason Wright's on notice. They're all on notice. Like, you're on the clock, man. Like, and it's not going to be 8-1's not going to cut it anymore. So, better
and
be.
That's good for you.
Yeah. I mean, I have no problem with standards. I think standards are a good thing, like you can't just keep running through the same mediocrities. Okay. It's not okay. Like people pay top dollar to watch your product. It should be a good product, or you should be trying to make it a better product, and stop hiding behind platitudes. So, I think Josh Harris is going to be a pretty solid owner for this team. I don't think he's going to be the, man of the year in Washington or anything like that. But I mean, I think he's going to do what needs to be done, which is, what are we doing and who can do it better if you guys can't do it?
The fan base is all excited because they're at least a certain portion of the fan base because, maybe we'll get a new rebrand. I can't imagine that any owner is coming in after spending all this money wanting to spend more money on a rebrand. Yeah. Or do you think it'll be something he considers?
I don't think so. I mean, for the reasons you just said, like he's spending spending $6 billion to buy this team. That's a lot of money, and a rebrand, even the cheapest rebrand is going to be millions and millions of dollars to do it right, because you have to have focus groups, you have to have testing, you have to hire PR people, you have, it takes 2 years. Right. And so I doubt he will change the name. I think his priority will be, as it should be, is who's going to help me build a stadium. I mean, that's going to be his number one thing coming into this. Once he gets his feet on the ground, is which one of you 3 municipalities is going to help me build a stadium? And I don't know, because I haven't talked to him, or I don't know from talking to his people. Does he just want a stadium, or does he want Jerry World? See, Dan Snyder wanted Jerry World. He wanted the same thing here, and nobody was going to help him do that. Yeah. But if Josh Harris comes in and says, I just want a stadium, I don't care about all the other bells and whistles, I think there's a much better chance he could get that done with governmental help, with public resources. And it could be in any one of the 3 jurisdictions, because DC certainly has the RFK footprint to build a stadium, but just a stadium, nothing else, right? You're not going to have the casinos and all that stuff. But Maryland and Virginia can do more. The question is, would they want to do more even for a guy that's not Dan Snyder? Like, there's limits. There's just limits to what people are going to give a billionaire to help them build, not just the stadium, but kind of like a real estate deal with them. There's limits.
Do you know, through the Athletic did a ton of reporting on the rebrand. Do we know that Dan Snyder pointed at the Commanders and said, yes, I like that one? Was he actually the picker of the name? Because I think people attribute Dan is giving the team this horrible name on the way out. But yet there's a ton of people that you talk to that say, listen, Dan really loved the team. And although he didn't do anything right, he didn't do it despite the team because he loved the team. So I was always curious who exactly picked Commanders.
It's a good question. And I don't know the exact answer to that. I don't know that there was one person that picked them. Right. I don't even think Dan did that. I don't think Jason Wright said, I like Commanders. And no, I think they had a number of names that will be acceptable to them. Right. And Commanders was one of those names. And some of the other names, they did not want to, I don't think they wanted to get into the morass of spending money to get the rights to, whether it's Red Wolves or Red Devils or whatever it is, because somebody else had that name. Their bowling team was called the Red Devil. You know what I mean? Whatever it is. And they just were like, we're not going to spend any more money on this. Like, Commanders is free and clear. Let's just use Commanders. And I think the group, and I think it was a group. I don't think it was one guy. I think it was a bunch of people who had some say in that process that maybe all said, Commanders is fine. We can live with Commanders. It's okay. And then you go to the league and say, is the Commanders okay with you? And the league went, fine. It's fine with us. So I think that's more likely what happened as opposed to a single person picking.
Right. Two more for we run.
Sure.
If Harris comes up to you and says, David, what's the best way to get the fan base back? You've been in DC for a long time. You know the fan base. What can I do right away to let the fan base know I'm here and I mean business and we plan on making things right?
Cut your ticket prices.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cut your ticket prices. I mean, you don't have to cut them to nothing. I'm not saying you give the tickets away, but I think a good faith gesture would be, hey, look, I want to get off on a good right foot for you. We're going to reduce our ticket prices 5 to 10% next year, to give more people a better chance to come, more of our fans to come into the stadium. Yeah. And there's things that you can do. It's harder now because of the ticket brokers are so powerful. But there's ways you can try to manipulate the ticket sales so that more people who live in the DMV area are buying those tickets. Now they can turn around and sell them to people from out of town. There's nothing you can do about that, right? But I think the Nats tried to do this to a certain degree back in the, when they were first starting to turn their thing around, right? They wanted more Nats fans in the stands. And so you can, I think that's one way you can do it. I mean, transparency, I think, always is good for a fan base. They want to think that they can have discussions with you, have some sort of dialogue with you. So, with everything that you do, I think you should explain why you're doing it, and not just kind of drop it from a Sermon on the Mount type of thing. Just explain, here's what we're thinking. Here's why we're doing this. And if you don't like it, let us know, and we'll think about changing it. At least give the fans some sense that they have some stake in this, and we all understand these are billion-dollar companies. You're not going to have, fan votes on who the coach is going to be. I get that. I think we all understand that, right? You can have fans feel like they're engaged in some of the process. I think they tried to do that to a certain degree with the name change.
Maybe too much.
Yeah, maybe too much. Yeah, right. So I think doing more of that would be helpful going forward. I know they changed the name of the song, or they changed the song, and it's kind of weird, I don't know that anybody really likes it. I mean, so yeah, maybe do something with the song and you bring it back. I mean, I think there's a way you can make the song sound the way the old song sounded without the word in it. There's a way to do it. You just have to kind of play with the words a little bit, so something like things like that, I think could be ways that the fans would feel maybe that they're being listened to or heard, or at least if not deciding, at least he listened to me. At least he gave me a fair shot.
David, you've been in the business for a long time at the highest levels in different capacities. You've seen it change in different ways. For the young folks watching the podcast today, what would you suggest to them is the best way to get into the business and be successful?
Well, I think it's a lot different now, Doug. And I think that's mostly to the good, right? Because I think technology has really made it much easier for more people to kind of get a foothold, get a following. People know how to use their phones to shoot, broadcast quality video now. And that gives you an opportunity to put stories and tell stories at a very kind of higher level than I certainly could when I came into the business. So the visual component, the editing component, certainly for people who are, kids love their phones and they know how to use their phones. They know how to cut videos. They know how to, put different things on Instagram and on Twitter and all the other spaces that they use, that they communicate with one another in. So That's part of it. But I still believe, Doug, I'm old, but I still do believe this, that the blocking and tackling of journalism matters. And so who, what, when, where, why are always going to matter. Asking questions is always going to matter. Listening to the answers to your questions matters most of all. I shouldn't say most. A lot of people who come into the business now have a goal that is different than I think is good for a journalist. Your goal shouldn't be, I want to be on First Take or I want to be on ESPN. Your goal should be, I want to be a good reporter.
Right.
Wherever that is. Because if you become a good reporter, you can be a good reporter anywhere. Like you can be a good reporter on TV. You can be a good reporter on YouTube. You can be a good reporter on a podcast. You can be a good reporter in print. There's all kinds of ways you can do it. So, but you have to want to be a good reporter. And that means you have to ask very basic questions when you first start out. Try to learn as much as you can, which is where the listening comes in. You have to listen to the answers people give you, because most people, when you start out, are smarter than you. They know more about the sport than you do. So you should listen to everybody because they all can teach you, and be humble. You have to bring some humility to this. And it's not just journalism. It's throughout our society. We tend to not accept or want to accept the fact that we don't know everything, and that there are people out there that know more than we do. And there are people out there who are experts in things, and maybe we should listen to the experts on some of this stuff. And so that, the small d democratization of social media has a lot of benefits, but that's one of its drawbacks, is that anybody that gets on Twitter thinks that they know as much as you do or as I do about the things that we really know a lot about. And so, and conversely, I think I am an expert on everything that I'm not an expert on, and that's what Twitter does. And that's why you have to kind of think before you hit send, like, how is this really going to help me? Other than me just bloviating, how is this going to really help me in any material way? So just bring some humility to it if you're just starting out. And be willing to listen and learn. Be willing to say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that question. I'll try to find out, but I don't know the answer. And I think you'll go a lot further and you'll last a lot longer if you do that.
Well, David, I both listened and learned today. So I appreciate you. Off to the ball game today for the Nats.
Yes, I'm going to go cover the Nats-Mets game, because the Nats, well, my surprise, and I think most people's surprise, don't suck as bad as I thought they were. So I like to find out why they are, they're playing pretty good baseball after they had a bad start, but ever since then they've been basically 500, which is way more than I think most people thought they were going to be. So
I thought they were going to be way down at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not. They're 2.5 games out of the last playoff spot. I mean, that's not what I expected. So want to go. And again, I'm going to listen. Why is this happening?
Well, I appreciate you, David. I always enjoy when you come on, and I'll be looking forward to the next time you come on.
Doug, my pleasure. Anytime, man. You know that. Anytime. I love talking to you.
Thanks, David.